Okay. So welcome everyone. My name is Paul Lai. I'm a librarian at Shoreview Library, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to this Arts Roseville Featured Artist Program. Just a couple of quick notes before we get started. First off, we do encourage you to say hello and chat and ask questions in the chat box in Zoom throughout the program. We will, however, only be answering questions at the very end. So if you do have questions and want to type them in during the interview portion, that's entirely fine. But just be aware that we won't actually answer those questions until the end. The other quick note is that this program is funded in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. And so we're very happy to have that support from the state. And I will be asking you all to fill out a survey, letting us know what you learned from this program at the end that helps to keep that grant funding alive. So without further ado, let me turn things over to Kathy. Hello.
Hi, I'm Kathy McComber, a board member on the Arts Roseville board, and we'll be doing a brief Q&A with the artist following today's presentation. I want to thank you very much for joining us on behalf of both the City of Roseville and the Roseville Arts Council. I'll just quickly review Michael's bio before we get into the program itself. He's a visual artist who specializes in creating work from recycled materials. Choosing a career in advertising, he worked in the industry for nearly 20 years before starting his own fine arts business. His original artwork installations can be seen in numerous locations throughout the United States, including airports, healthcare facilities, libraries, schools, and professional sports stadiums. So now I'll ask Paul to begin the interview portion, and then we'll have the Q&A at the end. Remember, your questions are more than welcome in the chat. Thank you.
Hello, this is Roseville Mayor Dan Rowe. I wanted to take a moment to thank Arts Roseville and the Ramsey County Library System for their featured artist program and for adapting to our current times by taking the program online in order to reach a wider audience. I believe the arts are important to us both as ways to express the feelings and emotions of our lives and our times, but also to find peace and meaning and hopefully understanding through creative expression and the enjoyment of that expression by others. I hope everyone gets a chance to connect with the Featured Artist Program and to appreciate and support the great local talent we have.
Welcome to the Arts Roseville Featured Artist Program, a partnership of Arts Roseville and the Ramsey County Library Roseville branch. We are so grateful for this partnership. My name is Eden Bart, and I am on the board of Arts Roseville, a local nonprofit organization with the mission of advancing arts, creativity, and community in Roseville. We're thrilled that we can continue to feature local artists through the Featured Artist Programming virtually for now, and we're so happy that you're joining us. Enjoy the program.
Hi, I'm Jevin Binman.
And I'm Jansen Binman.
And we are on the board of Arts Roseville.
Today's featured artist is a mosaic artist who works primarily with recycled and found objects.
He has a huge passion for conservation and surprising the viewer with materials that he uses.
Please welcome Michael Sweere.
in my childhood, I grew up in southern Minnesota, a town called Owatonna, and I'm from a big family. I have 5 brothers and a sister, and all of my family members are pretty artistic. All of my brothers are artists professionally in one form or another, and both my mom and dad were artists as well. My mom's passed away, but my dad's alive, and both of them worked in several art mediums, and they always encouraged us to do artwork. Another thing that's kind of cool about growing up in Owatonna is where my mom and dad raised us is a block away from the Owatonna Public Library. And so growing up, we spent all our time down there. I mean, it was just kind of a home away from home. And, you know, the full library full of books on every topic. I really liked looking through art books when I was a kid. And it was just this giant resource. And all the people at the library knew myself and my siblings growing up. Like I said, we kind of lived there. And then in one of the questions you had asked about early influences for art. And, you know, when I think back, one of the first things that I remember that really made me think about art or realize what art was the stained glass windows in a church that I went to when I was a kid, like really little. I can remember, you know, sitting in church and looking at all the stained glass windows. And I was always amazed at the color, how bright and intense the color was with the light shining from behind it. It looked electric, and it was just hypnotizing for me. And I used to stare at all those windows a lot. And that's probably one of the first things that I ever really remember about, you know, seeing artwork and being really attracted to it.
Have you ever done any stained glass work or?
Not true stained glass work, but I use stained glass a lot in mosaics. And it's a different process than doing a true stained glass like leaded windows. But I work with stained glass, the medium, quite a bit. And I really, oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I enjoy all the cool colors and like the swirling patterns and all the different stained glass that's out there. It's really cool.
So it's interesting that stained glass is a thing that is kind of triggering a memory for you because you are a mosaic artist. I feel like way back in history, mosaics were really used more for religious purposes in churches and everything. Do you think that love of the stained glass as a child kind of was in the back of your head a little bit as you started working with mosaics?
It must have been. At the time when I was a kid, I had no idea that I'd be drawn to it as an adult. And, you know, up until 15, 20 years ago, I'd never really knew that mosaic or, you know, mosaic similar type work would become my medium. I've always had an interest in painting and design and drawing, but it kind of found me more than me deciding that's what I was going to do.
I love that. Let's put a pin in that for a second. And let's kind of go back to your artistic family. What kind of artists were your parents?
My mom was a really good, just general artist. She had a big love for theater and antiques, fine art, and she was really good at drawing. That was kind of her skill, drawing and painting. And, you know, with 6 kids, after a certain point, she didn't have much time to do artwork. And, you know, it's sad after she's gone, though, I realize how much she sacrificed in order to, you know, raise us and put her artwork on the back burner. But she always made sure that we had paper and pencils and crayons. And it was usually the first thing to come out when we were bored or if she couldn't really spend the time with us. She would get out the art projects and say, make something. So my mom was a huge influence. My dad does mosaic work also. And he actually started doing it around the same time I got interested in it. We both just started talking about mosaics and I started working with it. And a couple of my brothers actually were experimenting with it. And my dad got into it. And so for about the last 10 years or so, my dad's done quite a few glass mosaics. And he recently did a big installation at Northwestern Health Sciences College in Bloomington. And I know he's really proud of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, my siblings, all my brothers do artwork in some form or another. Some are visual artists. I have a brother, Steve, who's an actor, and he also makes steel furniture. But it's a pretty creative family we came from, and I think we get most of it from my mom and dad.
Can you just kind of talk through the process for making a mosaic in general, just so we can get an idea of what that involves?
Yeah, it depends what the mosaic is going to be made out of. Over the last 20 years or so, I've done a lot of experimenting, trying different materials. When I decided I wanted to learn how to do mosaics, I was really intimidated with the material, like cutting tile or glass or stone, and finding the right tools, and just everything that goes with it was very intimidating to me. But I happened to figure out a way how to use paper to, in particular, recycled paper packaging. And that's how I taught myself how to do mosaics, how to learn how to cut the pieces so that they interlock better, how to start looking at color combinations together. And I really didn't have to invest much more than a scissors and a bottle of Elmer's glue. And, a lot of that stuff I did with my son when he was younger too. It kind of became a rainy day art project. But anyway, getting back to like doing a mosaic, it usually starts with an idea that I want to try to portray in the medium. And I'll sketch it or draw it out depending on how detailed it needs to be for the project. And then once I know the medium, whether it's going to be paper or made out of stone or tile or glass, then I start hunting for all that material. And that's like one of my favorite things to do, is to look for this stuff. I enjoy the hunt. But once let's say it's going to be a tile mosaic, I may spend a couple weeks trying to find all the right colors of tile and right patterns and textures. And then I gather it all together and start breaking it into smaller pieces or cutting it into smaller pieces. And then start assembling the picture kind of like you'd put a jigsaw puzzle together. And that's pretty time consuming. That's the most time consuming part of the whole thing. And once I have all the pieces in place, then I'll grout the piece and polish it up, and then it's done. Sometimes I build mosaics out of paper, or sometimes I build them out of wood scraps, glass and tile and stones, a lot of found objects. Lately, I've been experimenting with plastics, just because there's so much of it out there. But yeah, it's a process. It mostly starts with an idea, and then it's a lot of steps to build the whole thing.
So you mentioned looking for, enjoying the hunt of looking for pieces. Where are your favorite places to look?
I love to go to thrift stores like Goodwill, Salvation Army. At those stores, I can find two of the main mediums I use these days are tile and broken plates to make mosaics, and glass, and I can intermix like stones with them. But I get a lot of my broken plates from thrift stores. And then I also use tin, and I build, some people call them mosaics. They're more collages out of recycled tin. And when I go to thrift stores, I buy old canisters that had everything from coffee cans to maybe tea tins or candy tins that you'd get like Valentine's candy in. Sometimes liquor bottles come in tin, like boxes, almost like a decanter. I never know what I'm going to find when I go in the thrift stores, but I look for tin and I look for broken plates. And those are two things in almost any thrift stores you can usually find quite a few of. And so I go in there looking for specific colors. What else? I'll look for different textures on plates, like cool patterns. And I rarely ever go home empty-handed. Sometimes I don't find everything I need, but I love to look. And then another place that's really fun to look is the Habitat for Humanity building supply stores, because they get a lot of donated goods, and I can sometimes find full boxes of tile or remnants that people have left over. Sometimes tile showrooms will get rid of their old stock and donate it. And if I'm lucky, I'll come in there right afterwards and find a bunch of stuff I can use. I look for scrap lumber there occasionally. And I like to go to garage sales and, sidewalk sales people are having. But most of the stuff is all found. And what's cool, as opposed to traditional art materials, most of the stuff is not very expensive. I can buy a plate for $1 or $1.50 and get quite a few pieces of material to use. And tin canisters are anywhere from like $1 to $2. And it's kind of an interesting way. It's an interesting medium, and it's an interesting way to acquire it rather than just going to the art supply store.
Right, right.
Because you like the hunt, do you, using recycled materials, is that bigger than just going out for the hunt for you? Is there something about making something from something that was discarded by someone else and making it beautiful again?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
is it just like the hunt?
Yeah, you hit it right there. The hunt is fun, but the creative part is equally just as fun. And I really enjoy it when I can use something that I know probably would have ended up in a landfill or in someone's recycling bin. That it's really rewarding. It makes me feel like I'm doing just this fraction of something to make the world a better place. Because I don't like waste. As far as when I worked in advertising, there was so much waste where there was just stuff that would get thrown away all the time that really could have had a second use. So the waste factor is a big part of it. Trying to protect our planet for future generations and not just discarding things without any care of what happens to it. That's another big part of what I think about in working with this medium. And it's very rewarding, and it's nice to use something that could be garbage and turn it into something usable. Someday I hope, as people see this work, it inspires other people to use recycled materials rather than just throw things away.
Mm-hmm.
Right, right.
You said in your interview, I think it was on the PBS interview, that you like the viewer discovering kind of with you what the materials you've used are. So if it's raining, sometimes you'll use the barcodes from packaging, and it's kind of an exploratory experience for the viewer as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I love that part about it. I guess when I come up with a design or even an idea for one of my own projects or a commission project, I love it when somebody can see the piece from across the room and it interests them enough so that they want to walk over and look at it a little bit closer. I think, that in itself is a big success. If somebody's walking through a public building or an airport or a bank or a school or someplace where I might have a piece of artwork that can be seen from a distance, if they take the time to go and look at it, that in itself is pretty successful. Or, to me, it feels pretty successful that you can get their attention. But then if you get a viewer that actually takes the time to look at it, I want to create something so that if they're going to take the time to really look at it, that they get rewarded to some degree, or that they see something in there that they couldn't have seen from across the room, whether it be a sky that's made out of lots of little black barcodes, or maybe it's a section of a lake or a big chunk of water that looks like blue water from a distance, but as you get closer, you realize that it's got all these patterns from broken dishes, and there might be words that I found off of coffee cups that I can intermix into it. Sometimes I can even find like little faces or animals, and if the piece of plate or a piece of tin that I've used is the right color and it's got this kind of hidden imagery in it, it's really fun to throw that in there, because from across the room you wouldn't even notice it, but up close you realize, like, wow, this is actually really elaborate, and there's all kinds of stuff to look at.
Do you find do you find yourself influenced by artists like Andy Warhol for, the soup cans and making those really exciting again? And also, even like going off of the French Impressionists, like Dadaism, which is kind of an idea of what you're talking about with from across the room. It looks like a full brush strokes, everything. And then the closer you get, you realize all these little pieces
Pointillism.
or pointillism, yeah, have made up.
Yeah, I mean, those are all influential to me. There's other artists too. There's this guy who passed away about 10 years ago who was from the Atlanta area, and his name was the Reverend Howard Finster. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was a tinkerer, or like a repair guy that really got into fixing things. And he said one day he had this divine intervention from God that told him he needed to be an artist, and he dropped everything and decided he was going to be an artist without any training. And all he really had were these like bicycle repair tools and a big junkyard. And he started making art, and he spent like the last 40 years of his life creating his own personal museum called Paradise Gardens, where he was able to buy a block in a whole city and turn it into an outdoor sculpture garden. And then he kept buying more and more property, and it got huge. And now I know the Atlanta Art Institute has a whole wing dedicated to his work. But he was a huge influence to me, just how he could find everyday objects and turn them into really interesting pieces of art.
Right.
But yeah, you know, the Impressionists, I love to landscape paint, and I still try to do it when I have time. I think studying from nature and getting outside, observing light and colors, it can only help to make you a better artist no matter what kind of medium you work in. But yeah, a lot of the artists who've used found objects have been hugely influential to me. The first time I saw this artwork by an artist named Kurt Schwitters was at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And he was using old recycled paper, like printed material, things that he found around the turn of the century. And I saw that, and that really like tripped some triggers with me. I'm wanting to try to use materials that people had never used before.
Right. So you mentioned you were in advertising earlier in your career. What was it, divine inspiration for you as well to become a full-time artist?
Well, I've always wanted to be an artist ever since I was a kid. I knew I was halfway decent at it, you know, as early back as grade school. And then as I got older, I realized I wasn't that good at anything else. I really realized this is probably going to be about the only thing you're going to be able to do and make a living at. So, you know, I knew from an early age I wanted to do it. I had a high school teacher named Barney Anderson, who was a really good teacher, who taught me to learn how to draw. I mean, he basically said, you can never get better, or you should never stop learning how to draw. You'll only get better, and you need to practice all the time. And that kind of stuck with me. After I went to high school, then I went to Mankato Tech in Mankato, Minnesota. And back in the 80s, it was a 2-year course called Commercial Art. And that was basically, yeah, it was pre-computers. But I did the 2-year course, and then I worked at a printing factory for a little while, and then I moved to Minneapolis and got hired at the first little ad agency that I worked at. And for the next 20 years, I worked at different ad agencies, and I worked as an art director. So it was fun. It was creative work, but it was always creative work for other people, helping them sell their product. And you know, after about 20 years of doing that, I realized that I didn't think I could do it much longer. I was burnt out on it. And you know, about that time, I really started showing my own work. I got involved with Roseville Gallery in Minneapolis and started showing my artwork that I'd been building, you know, on my spare time. And at the time, I was recently married, and my wife knew I was burning out on my job, and she said, "Well, you got to start working on a plan. You know, what are you going to do? How are you going to become a full-time artist?" And other than knowing I needed to have some really good work to get out there for people to see, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew I'd have to get that special break. So I kept working in advertising, even though I wasn't real happy with it, and showing the artwork. And then the big break happened in about 2004 or 5. an architect came in and saw a show of mine at Roseville, and he was involved with a healthcare facility in southern Minnesota, a really big one that was looking for an artist to do a mural in a new pediatrics clinic. And he asked me if I would be willing to take the project on. Excuse me. And so he connected me with this client, and we worked together. And I realized it was a big project that would take close to a year. And I knew I couldn't do that and work my full-time job. So I quit my job and I took the project, and it went really well. And before I had the project done, I had another one lined up with a different client, but I didn't have anything else after that. And so I took the second project, and before I got that done, then I got another project. And luckily it's been on about a 16-year run of doing it full time now. And I think it just kind of comes down to trying to do the best work you can and throwing it out there and hoping that sooner or later somebody will see it.
So a year-long project, can you kind of walk us through that? Was it a year-long project because the artwork was so big, or because you had to go through so many hoops, or?
A little of both.
Yeah.
It was a really big project, and then it was a lot of time spent developing the design or the idea so that everybody was happy with it. And once it was approved, then getting contracts signed and all the legal side of it, which was totally new to me at that time. But yeah, probably the first couple months were spent just, doing the concept, doing paperwork. And then once I got the go ahead, it was probably maybe 6 to 8 months of actually building time. And it was a big paper mosaic. It was 6 feet tall by 16 feet wide, and really detailed, showing over 100 species of native Minnesota animals and plants. And it's in a pediatrics wing at the healthcare facility. They have a hard time if you mention their name. That's why I can't say it. I mean, you have to get clearance to mention their name on any kind of social media or press release. So I just usually say it's a healthcare facility in southern Minnesota, and most people figure it out.
So you mentioned that you gained inspiration from your parents, but I understand also from your the PBS video that featured you that you've also gained inspiration from your son. Can you talk about the creativity that you were able to share with him at a young age?
Yeah, I think I've told this story a few times, but it's always kind of interesting. Back when I was still doing advertising, my son was young. He was, a baby up until in his teens. I was still doing advertising work. But I had been in New York, and I had come back, and it was Saturday morning, and we were catching up. And I told him how I had been, I'd seen all this cool artwork. And I told him about seeing the Kurt Schwitter's artwork made out of old paper things. And a friend of mine had actually taken me into the village to see all these light poles that an artist and his buddies over back in, I think from like the 70s up until the 60s, maybe till the 80s. This artist and his friends, all in Lower Manhattan, they were creating mosaics on light poles and utility boxes and in cracks and sidewalks. And but they used like broken glass and bottle tops and buttons and things that were all found. And this artist and his friends, they were just salvaging it all. And then without really any real permission, they were mosaicing everything they could find out on the streets. And this friend of mine knew I liked mosaic work and brought me down there so I could see some of it. And at the time, they were actually trying to get rid of a lot of it. The city was, trying to remove some, and people complained enough so that this artist's artwork has been preserved, and there's still quite a bit of it down in the East Village in New York. But I came back, I told my son about that, and I said, it was so cool. My son's name's Mickey, and I was like, oh, Mickey, you would have loved it. And I said, they would take anything. We were having breakfast, and I held up a cereal box, and I said, they'd cut this up into little pieces and they'd make a mosaic out of it. And he looked at me and he said, well, why don't we do it right now? And we didn't have any other plans. So I said, sure. And we got a scissors out and I cut up an Apple Jacks box into lots of little pieces. And then he was really into sorting the colors out, like all the green in the box went in one pile, all the red and all the white. And then we just together, we started gluing down all these pieces on a piece of scrap cardboard that I had. And we got it done. We only spent maybe a half hour on the whole thing, but those bright colors on the cereal box really popped out on the cardboard. And he was really proud of it. And I thought it was pretty cool too. And I held it up for him and he told me he thought it looked like a rabbit jumping into a hole. And from an abstract kind of stance, I looked at it and I sort of thought that, yeah, it does kind of look like a rabbit jumping into a hole. And something really clicked for me at that point. And I thought, if we could do this in a half hour, and both of us think it looks pretty cool, what if we use this medium and spent many hours or many days building something really elaborate? And that was like the whole beginning of working with kind of alternative mediums to build mosaics. It was like, that was the day it started.
Wow.
And I know in the next few weeks, we did about a dozen paper mosaics, and some of them were really funny, where we just start juxtaposing funny imagery from one package with the other. And man, it was really fun. It was so experimental. And that's kind of the whole seed of where this whole thing took off from.
That's great.
Do you ever go back to your son just to get a different perspective on things like, hey, let's make some cereal mosaics?
Not these days. He's pretty busy. He's got a daughter of his own now.
Okay.
He, my son he's not as into visual arts as much as he likes writing and he likes music. So he's kind of found his own path. But we do love to compare notes, just kind of as far as creative thinking goes. It's it is fun to catch up, but we're not building too many paper mosaics. Maybe with his daughter, my granddaughter, when she gets a little bit older. She's 4 now, so maybe in a year or two we'll start making paper mosaics together.
So how's your time split now between projects for individuals versus public or commercial projects?
Right now I'm only doing like really big commission things. I've got a little bit of free time in the evenings that I try to work on a few pieces of my own, just so I have them for entering contests or shows, throughout the year. But right now I'm doing a giant mosaic. I say giant because it's 22 feet wide by almost 10 feet tall, and then there's extensions to it. But it's a giant mosaic that's going to go in a church, and it's coincidentally the same church that when I was a kid I used to really like looking at the stained glass windows.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It is. It's really amazing. Before my mom passed away, she was really sick, and she started going back to church there again while her health was good. And through her, I was introduced to one of the parishioners who wanted a mosaic built in the church. And this is like 3 years ago. And we started talking about it. And there's just so much development in getting everything approved. But the biggest space we could possibly get in the church, which I really didn't think would get approved, was approved. And so back in September, then everything fell into place so that we could start. And now, so the last couple of months, I've been building this church mosaic.
Wow.
And we're going to install that hopefully in February or March. And then once I get that done, I've got a series of 4 other really big mosaics for an agriculture company based in Fargo at their corporate headquarters. So that's going to keep me busy for about the next year. But it's nice because it's a steady paycheck coming in, and it's work that's not only, pretty rewarding for me to work on, but it's really challenging. They're bigger than any other mosaics that I've done, and I've got to kind of think bigger along with that. Just there's a little bit more planning, and it's nice having like one or two big anchor projects I can work on, because then I can do a little bit of my own stuff in the evenings and not feel too guilty about it.
How important is it for you artistically and creatively to continue to work on your own things? Do you feel like when you don't have the time to do that, that your creativity button kind of turns on low or turns off, versus when you do make time for that, then things just start firing a little bit more?
Yeah, it works kind of a couple ways, because I always sort of like knowing I have that project that has to have some work being done on it each day, because that's sort of a steady paycheck coming in.
Mhm.
But I also have to keep working on my own stuff, or I get like totally burnt out.
Mhm.
And it's they sort of feed off each other. Sometimes when I take that break in the evening and get away from the bigger commission project, it gives me a break, so that when I look at it with a fresh eye the next day, I can kind of spot things I might need to change. I think if I worked on it through into the evenings, like I said, I just get burnt out on it. And your eye, after a while, you don't notice things in there that maybe aren't the way you want them to be.
Mhm.
But then, also having that time at night to work, it's cool, because during the day when I'm working on somebody else's stuff, I get ideas for my own projects. And I keep a little journal where I try to just scribble stuff down so I don't forget it. But then, that's sort of like my thinking time, so that in the evening, then I can start, taking those ideas and figuring out which ones I really want to do as far as my own projects go. So it kind of gives me a break from each as I switch over. And I always do like to have at least two projects I'm working on, so I don't get too burnt out on one.
Do you have a dream project that you really want to do someday?
Yeah. If I could, I would love to do a series of artwork, either promoting the national parks in the United States, because I love the national parks. My wife and we're slowly trying to see every single one of them. I believe, I haven't done a count for a while. At one time I thought there was close to 60 or 70, but we've seen about half of them so far. And we've seen almost every single one of them west of the Mississippi. And in the next few years, we're hoping to start going east of the Mississippi to see more. But
Wow.
I would love to do something that promotes the national park, to try to get more people aware of how beautiful they are. And, they're there for everybody to see. And once you start exploring them, you really see how amazing they are. That would be a dream project. Another dream project would be if I could do like a series of promotional works to educate people to be better consumers and better caretakers of our planet. Things that promote recycling, or greener living, healthier living through smarter decisions,
Mhm.
being a better consumer. I think that's a lot of it, is Americans in particular need to not keep buying things that are so wasteful, single serve packages and the things that everybody just throws away. Yeah, if I could, get involved with the right people to do some promotional work that would better our lives and future generations' lives in regards to recycling and preventing pollution, I just love that. I think that'd be really cool.
Does that feel like a calling for you?
A little bit. I hope before my time is up that I can, do something to, share a little bit of what I enjoy doing so much with other people, and then maybe get them to think twice about certain things. Yeah, I would say it's kind of a calling.
Well, this has been great. Thanks so much, Michael, for spending the
Yeah.
time with us. Before we sign off, can you tell us where people can find you online or on social media, or if you have any shows coming up?
Yeah, well, with the whole pandemic thing, I don't have any shows lined up. I have a feeling once things get back to normal, or what the new normal is, everybody's going to be wanting to do shows. There's going to be so many art shows. There's going to be so many concerts, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I haven't booked anything yet, but I know I'll be taking part in a lot of them. Otherwise, you can see more of my work at michaelsweeremosaic.com. That's my business website. I'm on Facebook under Michael Sweere, and I try to post new works whenever I get them done. Otherwise, yeah, nothing planned, but once things get back to normal, there'll be a lot of new stuff happening.
Great. Well, thank you very much. This has been great.
Thanks, you guys. It's been a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for joining us for the Arts Roseville Featured Artist Program. To learn more about Arts Roseville, upcoming featured artist programs, and to join our email list, please visit artsroseville.org. You can also follow us on Facebook. If you've not yet had a chance to see the beautiful Unity Tower located in the garden of the Ramsey County Library Roseville branch, I encourage you to do so. This is a wonderful collaboration with students from Roseville Area Middle School, artist Lori Green from Mosaic on a Stick, and Arts Roseville. We look forward to future community collaborations. Thank you again for joining us today.
Well, I think we're ready to use the chat box. I'll introduce my colleague Karen Radchek is here. Radchek Fabatsa from the Arts Roseville Board too, and we're going to kind of switch off asking questions. Michael, what a tremendously fascinating interview that was, and it was fun that Eden's little bit at the end was also talking about mosaics. I'd kind of forgotten about that. So the first question we had is from Lisa Brienzo, and she wondered about the source of the dot patterns that appear in several of your works.
I think what she may be referring to are the mosaics that have circular tile pieces. And those are just either pieces of broken plates or ceramic tile that I hand cut down to make little circles. And then, I fit them together just like I would any other mosaic pieces. But because they're round, it gives them kind of its own sort of bubbly, unique look. I hope that answers the question.
I think that there were some round ones, but I also saw ones that looked like the heads of small brads. And I wondered if those were what was holding the tin. And so in some places, I assume this is what Lisa was talking about. In some places, it almost looks like it's outlining or a feature, and in others, it's attaching. And I think there was one with the waterfall where it actually looked like they were mirroring droplets from the falling water. Do you use brads or nails?
They're little nails. They're 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch nails, and that's what those little dot patterns would be. When I work with tin, I cut up these canisters with a tin snips tool, and then I end up making, I flatten those pieces out, and then they're layered and nailed together with those small nails. So it's almost like stitching a quilt together. Instead of using a needle and thread, you're using a hammer and nails and using tin versus fabric. But that's what those dots are from. It's just all the little nail heads.
Fascinating. Do you want to take the next one, Karen?
It says, what types of approvals are involved with commissioners' works, themes, materials, images?
Well, let's see. I mean, as far as like the approval process is, there's a lot of different things, and it kind of depends who I'm dealing with. Sometimes it's more working with architects to talk about the actual, building materials, how it's physically going to be built, and the aspects of working on site and installing pieces. That can be pretty time consuming just to get all those questions answered. And then there's the other aspect too of coming up with concepts. And sometimes the client will give me ideas that they really like and they'll let me run with it. Other times they'll tell me, they'll give me some boundaries and say, you come up with an idea. And sometimes, working as that creative person, you can hit it right away where they, they love it, say, yeah, this is exactly what we're looking for. Or they may say, no, it's not what we're looking for, and we don't know what that is yet, but keep trying. And so, then it can get really time consuming. And, but those are just, usually I end up having to go through those sort of questions on any kind of project. And it just depends on how elaborate or how complicated things are with how quickly that process goes.
Yeah, I would think that your advertising training helped with that, with
It did
working
a
with
lot.
the clients.
And
Yeah.
Karen, you being an ex-advertising person too, I know you've been through this a lot before. And sometimes it comes down to, I don't know much about art, but I know what I like, and I don't like it yet. So keep trying. Although I'm kind of lucky as I've gotten older and have been through this process more, I think it makes you a little better at troubleshooting. And yet you kind of know what kind of questions might come out there. You tend to know a little bit more how the client might be thinking. But it's always a process, and you never really know how it's going to go.
Eden, go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I was just going to say, I've noticed that most of your work seems to be quite hopeful. I don't see like a socio-political kind of angle. And I was wondering if that's intentional or what you're kind of trying to, I mean, you talked a little bit about the repurposing and the recycling, but I just noticed there's kind of like a joyful feeling to most of your work.
Yeah, well, that's important to me. In this day and age where everybody's so connected to social media and the news and current events, I like doing artwork that really isn't too reflective of that, because I just think there's so many outlets for that already. I think that kind of artwork, with a political kind of viewpoints, I think it's important that that work is being done. And I think there's a lot of really cool work being done. But for me as an artist, a lot of that stuff I can go to the internet to learn more about or get more informed about. And artwork for me is kind of an escape from all of that. I like to come up with things that make me smile and make me feel happy, and hopefully make other people feel happy too, because I just think there's a lot of other outlets if you want to get into a political discussion or learn more about current events. There's other venues to do that.
Mhm.
But I like making artwork that makes me feel happy, and I hope that it makes other people feel happy too.
So Eden had a question that your work sounds very time consuming. Do you use assistants, additional help from assistants or community members during the creation stage?
I have in the past. Lately, with the pandemic, it's been a little more difficult. My studio is pretty small, my current studio. So it's really, especially when I'm working on big mosaic projects, it gets a little too crowded to have a lot of people in there. One or two other additional helpers is about all the room I have currently. I had one of my nephews about 5 years ago got really interested in artwork, and he helped me on several projects, and it was just great. He's gotten older now, and he's got a lot of other obligations, so he hasn't helped me as much in the past. But I do know, especially as I get older and my projects get larger, I'm probably going to need additional help. I don't have anybody lined up now who that person would be, but I hope sooner or later maybe I'd meet some younger people, or just other individuals who might be interested in helping me, or other artists that like working in this kind of medium. I haven't really done any like full call outs to get other people to help me, but I just have a feeling that it'll be part of my future development as an artist, especially if I end up doing bigger projects.
Do you mainly stick with one, like flat surface, or have you done anything like you were talking about in New York, the people that worked on the poles or the boxes or anything like that?
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of dimensional work. I guess it's just because what I've been doing, there's enough demand for it. So I haven't had to look for other new things to do. But as more of a hobby, I love to do sculptural work, not necessarily as mosaics, but I love wood carving. And when I go out looking for my materials to make my mosaics, if I find cool pieces of lumber or wood, I try to acquire those. And about 7, 8 years ago, I did a show at Roseville that was all just wood carvings that were made from scrap and found wood. And it was really different than anything I'd done before, but it was really fun. And I think it's important as an artist to try doing new things whenever you can. But as far as like doing dimensional mosaic work, I haven't done much. It's just the flat stuff seems to work better for me. And a lot of the dimensional mosaic work that I am pretty impressed with, a lot of it's outdoors. And especially in our climate in Minnesota, to do good, long-standing, durable work that's going to last outdoors, you really need to know what you're doing. You have to use the right materials, and there's a lot of factors you have to think about. And so, you know, working on flat pieces that are more designed to be inside is a lot simpler for me. Maybe it's just because I'm lazy in a sense and don't really want to be learning all these new things when I'm pretty busy doing what I'm doing right now.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll let Paul wrap up and let people know about the survey they'll be getting after the program. Paul Lai from the library says he loves the examples of your work we got to see in the video and is curious about the size of your work. What is the largest piece you've made, and what are the typical sizes of your pieces?
Well, I don't know if there's a typical anymore, but recently, this last year, I did the church mosaic, which actually once it was all put together, it ended up being the big section was about 20 some feet, but then with the extensions, it was 36 feet in length and 12 feet tall. So that was the largest project I've done. And then one of these big agriculture murals I'm working on now is 20 feet by 12 feet. And it's really detailed. So those are some of the biggest projects I've done, you know, and I've done a lot of other mosaics that are probably, you know, 12 to 14 feet, 10 feet. But those are, you know, typically those are bigger than what I usually do. My own projects, I like doing them smaller because they're just easier to move around. And I've done some, you know, like miniature size pieces, especially when I first started out working with galleries, where I had to rely on selling work to make money. I did a lot of smaller pieces just because I worked at a gallery that used to get a lot of tourists, and they had told me, you know, they sell work that people can fit in a suitcase. And so, you know, I kind of kept that in mind with my gallery work, that oftentimes people who come to Minnesota want to bring back a memory, but they can't bring back a giant, you know, 20-foot mural. So, you know, they might like a little 1 foot by 1 foot mosaic or a tin piece. You know, as far as my projects that I build on my own, the ones that you know, are probably my favorites are usually like in the 2 to 4 foot kind of range, just because I can move them easily. They're not super huge where they take up a ton of room in my studio. And I don't know, I guess I feel like I can get my arms around the whole thing without it just seeming like it's just too giant and, you know, too detailed.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Michael. This has been just a delightful program and fascinating work. Do you have any final comments, Karen, before we turn it back to Paul?
No, I hope to see you soon, Mike.
I hope so. It's been good to see you again, Karen. Yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, take it away, Paul.
Sure. Thank you so much, all of you. I put in the chat box the link to that Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund survey. So if you have a minute, please do click on it and let us know what you learned. I'll also send that link out with the recording link afterwards via email. That will be later this coming week. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy. I think it's a pretty nice day outside, so hopefully you all get the chance to enjoy these last bits of somewhat summer.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.